And now, the most important part of our story tonight. Finally, the world is closely watching the growing strategic coordination between Russia and China. Just before arriving in Beijing, Russian President Mr. Vladimir Putin, he delivered remarks that many analysts interpreted as a carefully timed signal aimed at Washington. Well, the speech, it was forceful, confident, strategically ambiguous. And ambiguity, it itself is part of a message. Because uncertainty, it forces rivals to remain cautious. Moments later came the visual seen across global television screen. Mr. Xi Jinping, he welcoming Mr. Putin with full diplomatic ceremony in Beijing. Now, the symbolism, that was unmistakable. At a time when the United States is managing tension in Ukraine, competition with China in the Indo-Pacific, and instability in the West Asia, Moscow and Beijing are increasingly projecting themselves as coordinated global powers resisting Western influence. And this does not necessarily mean any formal military alliance exists, but it signals a growing strategic alignment between the two nations. Russia wants relief from Western pressure and sanctions linked to Ukraine. China wants greater global influence and freedom to challenge American dominance in Asia. And let's be honest, both countries increasingly share a very common narrative that the era of uncontested American dominance is now ending. And that is why the timing of Mr. Putin's visit, it matters so much, because geopolitics is often communicated not only through policy, but also through optics, the red carpets, the handshakes, the public statement, and the coordinated messages. All of this, it sends signals to the allies, rivals, market, and militaries around the globe. Now, for Washington, the concern is not about individual crises anymore. It is about simultaneous pressure across multiple regions: Ukraine, Taiwan, Iran, global trade route, energy security. These issues are no longer separate files on a diplomatic desk. They are increasingly merging into one large geopolitical contest over the future of global order. And tonight, one thing, it is becoming extremely clear. The world is moving into a far more competitive and unstable era than the one many countries become used to after the Cold War. The United States has tried to pressure Iran through military power, sanction, and diplomatic warning, right? But despite America's overwhelming military strength, Tehran still holds one major advantage here. And you know what is that? Geography. Specifically the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil choke point. Nearly 1/5 of global oil shipments pass through this narrow passage every single day. So any disruption over there, it instantly sends shockwaves across global energy market. And Iran definitely knows that. That is why many analysts, they say the current conflict is no longer just about missiles or any military strike. It is also about leverage. Now the particular story becomes even more complicated because Iran is not completely isolated internationally anymore. Yes, China, Iran's biggest supporter, continues buying discounted Iranian crude oil despite sanctions, helping Tehran maintain economic breathing space. And yes, not just China. Russia, in the meanwhile, is accused of providing military assistance, including satellite images, satellite intelligence, and strategic coordinates. But strangely, neither Beijing or Moscow wants direct war with Washington over Iran, because they cannot afford that. But both the countries do understand that prolonged American involvement in West Asia, it benefits them strategically. Why? Because it stretches the United States' attention and resources across multiple global fronts. America is already deeply involved in Ukraine tension with Russia, right? It is simultaneously trying to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. And now, the West Asia instability is pulling Washington back into another long-term geopolitical crisis. And this is exactly why Mr. Putin's latest China visit, it is being watched so carefully. At the timing, it was impossible to ignore. Mr. Donald Trump, United States President, had just completed his own diplomatic engagement, and almost immediately afterwards, Mr. Putin, he arrived in Beijing for high-profile meetings with Mr. Xi Jinping. Now, can you see the symbolism? The symbolism was powerful here. Both Russia and China are increasingly presenting themselves as alternative centers of global power. And in the meantime, for Washington, that creates a very difficult reality to accept. If America truly wants an off-ramp from escalating tensions with Iran, it may eventually require cooperation, or at least non-interference from neither Beijing or Moscow. And that is the paradox of geopolitics. Sometimes the countries challenging your influence are also the countries you need to stabilize the crisis. And tonight, global capitals are watching closely to see what price China and Russia may demand in return for that particular cooperation. Because in international politics, nothing comes for free.